Welcome to the Be Ruthless Show, where we have the conversations that other people don't, the conversations that other people won't. I'm your host, Sam Ruth, and I'm ready to make a lot of noise and disrupt things, ruthlessly. Thanks for being here today. Now let's get to it. Welcome back to the Be Ruthless Show. Joining me today is Lori Singer. Lori is a licensed psychotherapist and board-certified behavior analyst who heads Lori Singer Behavioral Services in Camarillo, California. Over the last 20 years, she and her team have used an uncommon integrative behavioral and cognitive therapy strategy to help those facing a wide variety of mental health issues. Lori is also an accomplished and decorated endurance athlete. She was a recent inductee into the Ventura Sports Hall of Fame and has competed in more than 100 marathons, in addition to many ultra marathons and Ironman triathlons. Not my thing. Lori also recently released her first book, You're Not Crazy, Living with Anxiety, Obsessions, and Fetishes, which brings readers into the therapy room and provides a workbook to help individuals serve as their own therapist. I love it. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, Samantha.
Talk to me about this book, because so many people, the first thing I'm thinking is the people who will never make that appointment need this book.
Yes, and so it's written where it encompasses the whole family and or a loved one of who doesn't know what to do because they can't help somebody. You can't force somebody to change, but you can maybe help yourself and help that individual. So the book, I have had my practice for over 20 years. And through the years, I've had pediatricians and dermatologists and psychiatrists and psychologists who recommend individuals to me. And the professionals themselves had said, your modality of therapies, the two combined together are so effective. It would be helpful if you could write a book. But life is so busy at times, well, most of the time. So it's difficult to especially if you're never written anything before other than reports and treatment plans. But when I turned 60 years old, I like to set goals for myself. And so a few years ago, when I turned 60, I thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to write a book. And the timing was actually perfect in the fact that it was right at the very beginning of the pandemic. And there was such an increase in anxiety, and individuals who had existing maladaptive behaviors were increasing in that. I mean, it was just tenfold. And so I thought, okay, now's a good time. And I wrote the book, and what I wanted to do was have people be able to identify with different things, because when people come in my office, a lot of times they might say, am I the worst case you've ever seen? And I say, no, you're not the worst case. And now I can say, you're not, read my book, and you'll see some of the very extreme cases with different diagnoses and how they're exhibited. So that's why I wrote the book. And I wanted to give the reader not only to identify, but to walk away with some tools that they could use themselves. And that's why the workbook is in the back of the book, where you could just fill in the blank, easy to follow, copy the pages, or I tell people you can just look up some of this information online and print it out. And so that's why I wrote it.
That's amazing. And I agree. I saw such an increase in people who already have struggled with the pandemic, but people who really had been resistant to mental health in general started to understand anxiety a little bit more, as the entire world was living in fear. And so what a great time. So if this is a parent or a spouse wanting to learn better tools for their loved one, the workbook also helps.
Yes, because in the case studies themselves, it has the entire family coming in, because a lot of times if an individual comes in by themselves, I encourage them to get other family members involved. What I do is I get to know the individual, and then I give them data sheets, and it's the antecedent behavior and consequence data sheets. But for a loved one or a partner or even a sibling, I have a data sheet that is from another person's perspective, because we can all be in the same room and watch something happen and everybody sees something different. And that's why it's important to get as much information as possible. And then that person feels like they're contributing. And sometimes, Samantha, I have to write a separate treatment plan just for the partner because they've been enabling this behavior for so long, they don't know how to stop. So there may be two different treatment plans going on.
So glad you brought this up because I don't know about you, but I am very selective when I refer to other professionals, and people think I'm strange because I include the whole family, or and that family by definition of whoever that person is living with and who they
Right.
identify as their family, because it doesn't just affect one person. But I have found that many professionals don't do that, and they just work with one person. So if you're listening and you are working with somebody who doesn't involve everyone, help people understand why it's so important.
Well, it's important because you're asking somebody to change a behavior, it within that family setting, if you will. If we take an entire family, a mom, a dad, and then the child, and we want the child to change, but you've been contributing to that behavior, maintaining for so long the maladaptive behaviors. So you need to change your behavior in order for that individual to change their behavior. And so it is a family process. And I always thought that family therapy is extremely important. Now, sometimes I will meet, I meet with the entire family, and then maybe they step out and I might meet half an hour with the client themselves alone. And, it's interesting because, and I don't know if you've come across this as well, but sometimes if, changing the dynamics of the family, once you help, let's say, a child or teenager, then the focus is no longer on them. And the parents have to focus on their own relationship. And sometimes they don't want to do that because they're not ready to work on themselves. So they may not change. And then unfortunately, the individual themselves, the client, doesn't change. So there are instances like that because your whole dynamics change.
And if you're listening and you are the perfect parent out there who needs to change nothing, I get it. It's still useful to be a part of the process because you receive information from us. So I live with anxiety and I don't appear like somebody who is unfamiliar with it would stereotype. I'm not like in the corner withdrawing. Mine presents in a different way. So for my family, they needed that data to know, right, okay, when you're acting like this, we think you're fine, but you're not.
And I think to, have the family involved, and we know that anxiety presents itself differently in different people. Some people will pace back and forth. Others will be very quiet and not say anything. And some engage in self-injurious behaviors like skin picking or hair pulling or whatever it might be. But I know, if I use a most recent case, an individual who was 15 years old, and he finally described to his mom what was going on. Because he was so quiet, she had no idea the turmoil that he was going through mentally. And she just started crying and said, I had no idea that this was happening to you. So it's good to let the family members in so that they can help and be more self-aware of what's going on.
I wanted to, there are people who maybe don't want to be a part of the process or maybe have things that they don't want to change. And I still want those people to know that it helps. You might not have to change a thing and you will still see major changes within the family. So is running for you an outlet?
Oh, yes. I have to, either run or hike or bike or whatever it is, because the work that we do is so intense and we're always putting out a fire. We're always trying to figure out how we can help a family or help an individual. And so it can, and especially now, we're just so inundated with clients who are trying to recover from what has happened over the last 2.5 years and get them back up and running. So yes, that is definitely, I have to do that for myself.
These are things that I think people who aren't struggling don't know. And they're great habits to implement so that you don't reach a point of struggling, because I was the type who didn't take breaks. And now I will not live a day without a break for my own sanity. But it went against what I thought meant being a hardworking person was.
Right. And then also I have a hard time. I know when clients come to me, they're in desperate need of help. You know, why else would they come to see me? It's not like they just want to chit chat. So, so it's hard for me to say sometimes, you know what, I don't have room to see you in my schedule. And if you do want to see me, I will put you on a waiting list. And I feel horrible for saying that. But I have to sometimes, and that's just the way it is. I can, if they don't want to wait, I can try and refer them to somebody, but I know that what I do is so different, because not only do we work with the family, but I give the individuals a behavioral plan and cognitive behavioral plan in a binder. Everything's written down and given to that client. They are made accountable to practice these strategies outside of my office in order for them to learn it. And I use the analogy of training for a race, like a 5K, 10K. You can't just sign up for a race and then on race day expect to be able to run it. You have to practice, you have to put in the miles. And that's the same for when you experience anxiety or engage in any maladaptive behavior. You have to practice in the moments when you're not engaging in it, to practice that replacement behavior, right? Or practice your new learned coping strategies for when you do have a panic attack or you're feeling anxious. And they are to mark down when they practice, and the family's held accountable, they're held accountable, and that's how they can be successful.
You also talked about your relationship with other providers, and that's also something I do, whether it's teachers, doctors, courts. I've always been involved with the entire process, and I did not know that I'm a minority. And so let's help people who are not with the right match. They're just skating by. A lot of people don't talk to, I think your primary doctor is one of the most important people in your world if I'm working with you.
I agree with you 100%. I think there has to be a team approach, that is the term that I like to use, because, and what if, what if this person, I don't want to say that they're not being honest, but they're not being transparent maybe, and they're in my office and they're saying that things are going well in other areas, in school, in their relationships, but then the parent might say, or the spouse might say, well, I'm not sure if that's true. I mean, just the other day you went to the doctor and had an increase in your antidepressant medication. So it's helpful to talk to others outside to see how they are, because the idea is that you can take the strategies learned within a session and generalize them to other settings. But how do we know if they're generalizing if we're not talking to other people?
And even if it's a family, I see a husband and the wife sees someone else.
Right.
But until I started working with him, there was no interaction. It was like two separate worlds, and there was a wall dividing them, and they didn't communicate. And I'm thinking to myself, we could work on jumping 5 times and they could be working on avoiding jumping altogether if we don't talk. So the first thing I did was get releases signed and work together. And it's not magic. I didn't create that, but we're seeing so much more progress than they had seen in the last year.
Right.
But I just want people listening to know that not all providers work the same way, and not all offer things that you might need. So if you feel like you're doing all the work, or if you just have a funny feeling that it's not the best match, here's 2 people, 2 different states, very passionate about working this way. So I just want to make sure everyone's needs are being met.
And also to piggyback on that as well, if you do have an individual who's school age, whether it's elementary school or university level, or in the workplace, you could even say, having these tools and talking to either a management in that position or somebody at the university to make sure that you're getting the accommodations you need within that setting for whatever diagnosis you have is important.
And I like how you mentioned with the workbook and some of the assignments, it's not done in crisis. So I like to talk to those universities and those people, not because there's a problem, to prevent one down the road. And so we
Ex-
have that team before we need it in place. And I don't think the world knows how many rights, parents especially, that there are for college age kids going off in the fall on their own.
Exactly. I just got a new client last night. He came in for the first time, 22 years old, and just diagnosed with ASD at 22 years old. And he was at college away in a different state. And one of his professors recommended that he get a psychological evaluation. He was so lucky that professor said something, because he did well the first 2 years in college, and then he just failed all of his classes. So he came to see me, and when we were talking, I said, are you open to, when you go back to school in fall, so we have a limited amount of time to get the work done, which I think we can, he's self-motivated. I said, are you willing to contact your school and show them your diagnosis on paper and get the accommodations that you need? And he said, yes, I am. So that's huge.
So huge. And there are accommodations, especially for incoming freshmen, that can be set up, but they're not offered. I went to a
No.
big university, you're one of 30,000. If you don't ask, they don't advertise.
Well, even the elementary schools themselves, they don't offer. They used to, over 20 years ago. I remember when the teachers used to advocate for kids. I think this person needed a speech evaluation. I think they may need a psychological evaluation. But then it got to the point where the schools themselves were saying, hey, this teacher's costing our school a lot of money. So the teachers stopped, I think, advocating. And maybe that's the reason, I don't know. But I don't see it anymore.
Yeah. And I do an entire workshop in the summer for all parents, but especially parents of freshmen going off to a different, not staying at home, to make sure everything's set up. I was a good student and I followed the rules, and going off to college is overwhelmingly filled with so many things, even for somebody not struggling, that if you're already aware of something, having it set up and being able to go to sleep at night knowing that your young adult has people to call can be the difference in their experience.
I agree. I had a much different experience because I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was in my 50s, I want to say, maybe 40s, 50s. So I barely graduated high school. And it wasn't until I started running that I was able to learn. I learned how to structure my time because I was training for a race. And then the local college asked me to come and run cross country. And I was scared not to run, but I knew I was going to have to take college classes. And what I did was I just applied the same structure for my training for races to doing homework and learning. And I had to start with baby math, baby English is what I call it, which was probably remedial or something. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm getting all A's. I can do this. And so it empowered me. And I was able, that's how I did it, until one day I was at a meeting with about, I don't know, 15 professionals. And after the meeting, one of the psychologists took me aside and he said, Lori, have you ever thought about being on medication? And I said, well, why would I do that? And he said, for your ADHD. I was so caught off guard. And I thought, what? And I looked in the DSM and there could have been a picture of me there, really, under the description. And it made so much more sense to me as to why I struggled so much as a child.
And those are the things that internally, if you're struggling and something doesn't feel right, even if somebody else isn't noticing it. So unfortunately, in this world, we're not taught how to advocate for ourselves, but that's what it takes. You reaching out to just one person and saying, what do I do? Help me find the next person. The workbook, you talk about the strategies. Is there one you can give as an example? Because people listening might think it's like school itself.
Yes. So So what I like, I use a lot of visuals, of course, because I'm a visual learner. And many years ago, what I use in my book, it's called the signal plan. And it's, everybody sees the signal when they come to it. Red means stop, yellow means make a choice, and green means go. And I use this with the cognitive part, that if we get a negative looping thought in our head, one that creates anxiety, then I think of the color red. Red means stop. Yellow, make a choice. I'm going to make a choice to think of something healthy, whatever that may be. I'm getting help. I'm working on my behavior. I know I can do this. Green means go. Use your stress ball. Take a deep breath. Whatever it is, whatever strategy that you have in place. And if you haven't gotten it in control, when you get to green, go back to red, because you've been engaging in these negative, irrational thoughts for so long that you may have to go back. This isn't working. I'm taking deep breaths. Okay, I'm going to try it again. Stop. I'm going to stop what I'm thinking. Make a choice. I'm going to make a choice. I am a good person. I can do this. I'm strong. Take some deep breaths and then move forward.
I love that it's a choice. And I love that you say doing it again and again, because it forces people to slow down. That's what you're teaching them. And in this world that's so fast paced, if you know you have to do it, it's my assignment, this is how I'm taking care of myself, then it's important. We do not know the importance that we're missing when we just keep going and ignore these clues. So that's a great, and that works for so many ages.
It for every age, no matter how simplistic it is. And I know that, and I even say that in my book. This may sound just very simple, and so you're thinking it may not work, but simple doesn't mean it doesn't have to work. It really can work. And it will, I think also people need to understand that they actually are in control of their thoughts, of what they're thinking. They think they have no control. And so those irrational thoughts just keep going and going until they take up a majority of our thought process. And that's when it becomes debilitating. And it affects our relationships, it affects our work, our school, anything.
Sleep,
Exactly.
You wake up with those thoughts, that's a sign.
That's
right? We
right.
can all wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, but if you wake up kind of picking up where you left off, your mind isn't getting the rest it needs, even when you are sleeping.
That's right. Absolutely.
I love that running is a tool for you. So many people need something active to help them get grounded. Other people can sit down and write or journal or do something more calming. But I want people to know that as long as it works for you, it doesn't matter what it looks like to me.
Right. I think you need to find, and that's absolutely right. You need to find what works for you. And some people, maybe they haven't found it yet. So you need to be willing to try new things. I had a young lady come in, and she wanted to start meeting new friends, but she didn't know how, and she wanted to be more active. So we looked up some hiking groups in the area, and she actually did. I was very proud of her. She went on a social hike with these people. She got 2 phone numbers. And so this gets the whole ball rolling. Once you can find something that you enjoy, then you can find a whole new social network.
And you can go back to basics, really, truly. I encourage people to think about when you were a kid and you did things just for the fun of it. What was fun? Because lots of people enjoy racing cars and doing, all sorts of things that are frowned upon for adults. And they're the healthiest ways to get out of an unhealthy mood. So I love that. And an unhealthy mood can just be feeling stuck.
And that's another thing, right? To empower people and let them know that you can move forward, because that's what it's about. When they come to see me, they are stuck, and they can either stay where they are or they can choose to move forward. But it's a choice they're going to have to. It's not going to come from just talking with me. You have to put in the work, and some people aren't willing to do that, and that's okay. They're not ready yet. But life isn't going to change unless you put in the work. That's just the way it is.
People have this perception that they're going to come into my office, lay down on the couch, and have to talk about their childhood. Tell them what it's really like.
So and that's why I like to do a screening first on the phone. They reach out to me and then I let them know, okay, this is what it's going to look like because I want to prepare them. You're not going to go into the day that you were born or your first memory. Of course, I want to know about your past, but I'm not going to make you relive every traumatic moment of it either, because I want to work on what's happening now and how we can move forward from that. And I tell them that they're going to be expected to take data. We'll work together in the sessions, and they're going to be made accountable for practicing on their own. And it's very solution focused. And not that I don't want to see them for the rest of their lives. But the idea of the therapy is to give them the tools that they need so they can leave my office in a few months and be able to enjoy life again.
Do you only see people locally, or do you have a virtual option?
I have virtual as well. I have people that have bought my book in different states, and I'm working with a few right now.
So how do people connect with you if they're listening right now and you sound like a good fit? How do they reach out?
I always tell, email me. You can email me. You can look at you'renotcrazybook.com or Lori Singer Behavioral Services. Either one. I have two different websites, and so they can reach out to me on either of those. I've always answered my emails. I return the phone calls. I just had somebody, I think she lives in New Mexico, and she was asking questions about her daughter and just different questions she had. Not that I was going to see her daughter, but she had questions. And so I answered her questions. I don't mind answering questions.
And there are people who might not be ready to get help themselves, but you, like this mother, you can still reach out and get help for yourself.
Yes.
You're in a relationship with someone. So do you do those type of appointments as well?
Yes.
My boyfriend is driving me crazy, but he won't get help.
Yes. In fact, I'm working with the couple right now, and it's unfortunate because she's in a emotionally abusive relationship, and it's very difficult. Very difficult.
And I'm sure millions of people listening can relate to that. Somebody in your life is struggling with something else. That could be anxiety, that could be diabetes. You can still connect with somebody who's an expert in the field and say, how do I better interact with this person, because they're not ready to take that step. So
right. And so I try to educate the individual on what a healthy relationship looks like, and is that in their future? And if it's not, then they need to make a decision on how do they want to live the next 15 years of their life.
Right.
It's
any other topics we're missing? I love these conversations. Anything I'm not covering that you'd like to?
Another thing that I do have in my book that's a little bit different, I believe, is it's called a motivational story. And so for each client, from the data that they gather, because like you said, I like to take a proactive approach. That's why we do the ABC data, to find out what the triggers are, so we can take a proactive approach and stop the behavior before it occurs. And then also look at the consequences, which could be a family member enabling or just not leaving the house, whatever the presenting problem is. And from that, I write a motivational story. And for example, it may be, my name is Lori Singer. I have ADHD, but it does not define who I am. At this time in my life, I am stuck, but I want to move forward. So it talks about the things that you might be experiencing and how do we change that around into a positive. And then at the very end of the story, it talks about the next time I get a negative thought, I will stop whatever I'm thinking or doing. Yellow, I will make a choice, a healthy choice. And then green, I will use a strategy. And in the book, so there's examples for the case studies on how this is implemented, but also in the book, there's a questionnaire where you fill in the blank. And then you're able to write your own story in the back of the book. So you have the signal plan, you have your own motivational story. The ABC data sheets are in the book as well. And there's also visuals that you can either print out or look online, stay calm, think positive, different things like that.
That's amazing. I'm thinking of my nieces and how much fun that would be to do together. So I think it's just, this is something we should be teaching, right? We have to take science. This is a book we need, and it works for any relationship, any age. And I pictured us doing it together. So it can be private or interactive.
Yeah, and it's teaching how to use that positive self-talk. A lot of us only have negative self-talk. Oh no, what if this happens? What if this is going to happen? I don't want to do this today, or I'm afraid about this today. These are all negative, anxiety-provoking thoughts. We need to learn how to engage in positive self-talk. I'm a strong person. This is another day. I'm lucky to be alive. Isn't it beautiful out? Just change that mindset.
Yeah, I call that's the Mean Girls in my head. And I don't know why I ever listened to them, because I never would have been friends with people that treated me that way. But It was me. So I love that you're calling attention to all of these things. Any final thoughts for everyone listening?
No, I hope everybody is able to get the help that they need, whether it's through a book or through therapy or talking to a friend. I just want people to know that there is hope out there.
And accepting help and reaching out is a strength. That's my biggest thing. There's so much stigma surrounding things that should be encouraged, not stigmatized. So thank you. If you want to connect with Laurie, it's Laurie Singer, and that's Laurie Singer.
Correct.
Behavioral.com or you'renotcrazybook.com. And until next time, everyone, always be ruthless. Thanks so much for listening today. Your support means everything to me, truly. If this podcast resonates with you, please do me a favor and join in the Ruthless movement by making some noise and doing one of these 4 things. Subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Tell a friend so we can break stigmas even faster. Leave a review so people can see what you think of the show. And last, if you want to learn more about me and be a part of the Grief Hab community, please head on over to the Facebook group. We'd love to have you. Thanks again for spending your time with us, and see you next week.